This is B2B Enablement, a Klyck.io podcast created to inspire sales and marketing leaders navigating digital transformation. I'm your host, Dave Carr, and on this show, we'll share actionable insights to build winning digital strategies and deliver better sales results with your customers. Well, hello everyone, and welcome to episode number 23 of B2B Enablement. Today, we're going to hop into the topic of how to optimize your B2B website strategy. And that is going to be a big one, probably somewhat similar to opening Pandora's box. But today with me, I have Sam Moss, who is an absolute expert in the realm of website development, website management, and strategy. And we're going to unpack this topic, and we're going to start out talking about some basic concepts and then moving into some more advanced concepts as well as we get through the discussion. But first and foremost, I'll give Sam just a quick second here to do an introduction of himself, and then we'll hop directly into the topic.
Awesome. Well, Dave, thanks so much for having me on the show. If you're listening to this, Dave and I met on a podcast of our own. We're friends on LinkedIn, so appreciate you having me here. I own a website design and development company, primarily focused on doing performing website solutions for SaaS companies in upstate New York and across the United States. And I host a podcast of my own, like I said, that Dave was on, called B2B Made Simple. So again, Dave, I appreciate you having me here. Thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's always great too. You talk about the LinkedIn network and the cross-pollination and the discussion we had on Sam's podcast was another great one. So if you haven't subscribed to that, I would encourage you to check it out, and I'll leave a link to that in the show notes. So diving into this topic, as I mentioned, we'll start basic and we'll move more advanced. In all of my episodes, I always include on the landing page or in the show notes just some timestamps. So if you're a more advanced user and you want to jump to some of the topics around like, hey, how do I help my site generate more leads, or how do we have more conversion? Just check the show notes. You can find those timestamps there. Otherwise, where I'd really like to start, Sam, is just having some initial discussion around, why do most B2B sites struggle to get quality results? And what is just your overall synopsis of when you start working with a client? What are some of the common things right out of the gate that you try to address?
Yeah, so there's a number of things. One of the first areas that we address would be more of just the backend issues going on, because a lot of times you can have a great looking website, but if you're not really fluent in what's going on in the back end, it can slow down the site. And that's one of the things that we see more often than not, is it's a horrible customer experience for your buyers coming to your website, and then it takes 5, 10, 25, a minute to load, right? Obviously, that's like an exaggerated example, but that would be one of the first things that we tackle. And I would recommend, if you're listening to this, really take a speed test and see what's going on with the site. Is it going to be an enjoyable experience? So that's like the technical side. Now, let's say you get that under control. Another thing that we see a lot is that marketers tend to do this. They overcomplicate everything, right? And this comes down to websites as well. So they overcomplicate the flow, they overcomplicate the messaging, and they just make it way harder and way more confusing for the buyer than it needs to be. There should be a call to action that says, get a demo. And that should be like one of your main points, right? Tell people what you do. So at a very high level, that's what we see going on with a lot of these sites. And it needs to be addressed.
Yeah. And having simple CTAs in a flow is, I don't think you can exemplify that enough, because that is just so important, especially for, B2B service industries. If you don't have e-commerce embedded in your site, like allowing people to know where do you need to take action. And I see that very commonly as well. And then from site speed also, one handy resource, and we've used this a lot, is just the Google Page Speed Insights. Mm-hmm. It's a free test. You can run it. It gives you a score on mobile and on desktop. And there's always a lot of places that you can start to optimize. So talking about data and measurement sort of brings me, I guess, into my next point, which are, when you think about measuring a site and you think about the KPIs of your website, what are some of the things that you should be measuring to gauge your site performance, and both related to technical and conversion? Maybe just unpack that for us a little bit.
Honestly, it boils down to how many people are booking a meeting, booking a demo, calling, setting up an appointment. Those are all the KPIs that we would say that you need to track, right? It's great to have audience. It's great to have people to your website. But if they're not turning into anything, then what does that matter? Right. So when it comes to like, this is what we're looking for, this is like the end all, it would be simply how many people are reaching out to do business with us. And that's what we like to tell all of the, our clients. And even, I'm a big proponent of this on LinkedIn. Just make it easy for them to do it. And that's how I would measure it, is right there, is those meetings booked.
Yeah. And when you think about things that get a little bit more technical, like SEO, and even SEM, backlinks, things like that, what are some of the tools you use? What are some of the metrics you're looking at to make sure that you're optimizing those sort of strategies if you're getting more advanced on that side of the coin?
So I don't pretend to be an SEO expert by any means, but another metric that I would keep an eye on is bounce rate. So like I said, I can't really go into the SEO side of things, but bounce rate is really important. And what that means is like how many people are coming to your site and leaving within X amount of seconds, right? And that can be, one, they're the wrong traffic coming to your site. I mean, if we were to dig into this, right? The wrong traffic. It could be that your messaging is way off base and they can't even figure out what you do to continue scrolling. Or this goes back to page speed. They're ready to go and your site is still sitting there loading. So that's more of the technical side that we look into. And that's a really good KPI to keep an eye on as well.
Yeah. So we have used SEMrush, SEMrush, for those if you're not familiar. There's a lot of other great tools. Moz is another one that you can use to do, some better in-depth SEO research. For us, we're always looking at bounce rates as well, load times, things, that we can track with Google PageSpeed Index. But one thing as well, and it's a much longer game to play, is backlinking strategy. And so one of the things that we do frequently is track our number of backlinks. We've even used some campaigns to grow those backlinks, to get featured in guest blogs. And so from a marketing perspective, that's one of the things we do at Klyck to try to improve our website and the performance and the rankings. And it takes time. That's the challenge. It's not, in 2012, 2011, you could go out and do a little bit of work and see a huge amount of results. It's a much more competitive world out there. So, you really, one thing I always try to tell B2B marketers when you're thinking about those strategies is, breaking down short-term results by using SEM or search engine marketing, so basically paid ads, to drive short-term traffic while you're working on those longer SEO plays, just because they take so long. But it does pay off, and all of that relates back to domain authority as well, and that's something that we've tracked on. Yeah, so just looking at your site's DA and making sure that you're positioned, and looking at your competitors too, right? So you can kind of see in those tools, what are their domain authorities? How many backlinks do they have? What keywords are they ranking for? That's another big thing that SEMrush will do, is they'll kick out a really comprehensive list of what keywords you're ranking for, and then you can figure out if the work you're doing in content creation is actually producing results or is falling on deaf ears. So.
Real quick, you bring up a good point though about, and this is kind of a tangent here, but you said, look, even though we're doing a backlink strategy, which is going to be a long-term, results that we're hoping for, you're also doing things in the short term to make sure that you're hitting, whatever it is that the board wants you to hit, right? You're hopefully generating pipeline of revenue. Now, I think that can be said with all marketing, right? If you started a podcast and that's your only marketing strategy, guess what? You're probably not going to get any results from that
right.
for a year, right? If you started posting on LinkedIn today and that was your only marketing, you're not going to see results from that for 6 months to a year if you're doing it right. So marketers, you need to do what you need to dot your I's and cross your T's, right? And then when the time comes, almost when you don't need those brand building activities or the things that are almost going to have indirect results down the road, then you can do them if you're executing well on all the things in the short term.
Very, very well said, Sam. And I totally agree. And I've seen a lot of other SaaS companies too, when you're very early and you're just launching a project, you're just having a website up. In fact, I was talking to a guy the other day that had a really cool SaaS product. It's a QA tool for web development, and the site just looks beautiful. They're not really getting a lot of traffic because they're not doing a lot of paid marketing. They're not doing a lot of other strategies that play into that. So it is a healthy blend, and it's knowing where to pick early on. I always kind of break it down into like painkillers or therapy. Like if you've got a knee ache, you can take painkillers and it fixes it right now. That's kind of like your paid search, right? Like that's going to produce very quick results that can show immediate tangible benefit. When you want to have something that goes, a little more long term, that's where you're building your SEO. And the SEO is that, hey, I'm going to go to therapy. I'm going to fix the problem long term. Another point you made earlier, I want to circle back to, is paying attention to your channel. So where is that traffic coming from? Because you're right, it can symbolize or show you through the data where you may be having breakdowns in a certain customer type. Like, hey, maybe all the traffic we're getting from Facebook has a super high bounce rate. They don't spend a lot of time on site. That's indicative of maybe a bad product market fit or bad messaging. Whereas, maybe things we're doing through organic search produce really good website metrics. I think having the attribution to track that is also important. And I would love to hear your thoughts or expand on that as well.
Yeah. Well, if you think about it, where your traffic is coming from should also dictate how your website is structured. Or I guess I should take a step back and say like your go-to-market strategy, right? So for us, transparently, we have done almost zero work on SEO on our site, right? Our strategy is relationships, organic LinkedIn, and a podcast. And the reason we haven't focused on SEO is a lot of times the buyers that we're going after aren't going to Google and searching web development company, right? A lot of times it's going to be SMBs that are doing that and they're looking for design. So we found our ideal buyers are in LinkedIn and they're listening to podcasts, right? So that's where we're going to focus. And because of that, they know who we are when they come to our website. These are branded searches if they go to Google, it's going to be one-click agency, right? So that dictates now how we're approaching our website and how we message it, where we're putting call to actions, how we're describing what we do, right? So these people have a lot more intent when they come to our website, and therefore the website doesn't have to do as much heavy lifting. So they're almost like 90% convinced that they need to do business with us, and the website kind of gets them like 10% of the way, or the rest of the way. Now, for example, if we're doing SEO, which is a totally different marketing strategy, and that's what we're banking on, then obviously when they click on your website, they don't know who you are. So you have to tell a totally different narrative, a totally different story. Your content has to do something totally different than what we're doing. And that's where you have to take a step back and go, well, what is our marketing doing? Where are we hoping to get this traffic from? Even if it's paid search, right? If it's social ads, right? All of those things, they're all different. And whatever your main strategy is, your website should cater to that.
Yeah. Well, I love that we're getting down some tangents and deeper into marketing than just web strategies in general. But typically, I mean, if you're a marketer, that's going to be a huge piece of your strategy. You're going to be optimizing for web. But I mean, I honestly feel like we could do an entire episode just around what strategies do you pick for what channel, and how does that relate to what you want to accomplish? And kudos to you guys on the SEO play as well. And I hear so many people saying that now. It's like, hey, look, we're not even really going to focus on SEO because we're interested in building branch or short-term growth for early stage, companies if you're going the SEM route. But SEO is just so hard to compete. And a lot of times if you've got big competitors, you're going to get washed out because they may have hundreds of thousands of backlinks they can build for domain authority versus your inability to do that. Something I would want to touch on as well is landing pages and the value of having customized landing pages, simply because depending on where that buyer is coming in, you do need to tell a different story. And so, we have found one of the biggest things that we've helped our conversion strategy is making sure that we have different pages. So whether somebody's coming in through LinkedIn, whether they're coming in through a retargeting campaign, however, we've got a message that talks to them at where they are at that stage in their buying journey. Your homepage is never, and feel free to interject or disagree with me on this. Your homepage, yes, it should be general, but it should never be the one central place you always send people, because it does tell, a more general message. And I love the idea too about winning on branded search. And, I hear Chris Walker does such a great job of nailing this. And if you don't follow Chris Walker, you should on LinkedIn. But some of the comments he makes around how they help their clients win on branded search by producing the right kind of content, podcast and other things that develop thought leadership, is way, way easier to win in 2021 than SEO.
Yeah. And that's that. So another point here is like, even though we're not focused on organic SEO, right? we have our branded search. So like if you type in our website, or if you type in our company name, our website's going to come up. Like that should be across the board. So like, let me make that clear if you're listening to this. Even if SEO isn't your strategy, when someone goes to Google and they type in Klyck or even One-Click, right? You need to come up and I need to come up. Or if you type in Refine Labs, or if you type in Drift or Gong, like you're going to see who comes up, and that should be 100%. You should be ranking in. That would be branded search, I believe is the term for that, right?
Right. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. If you're not winning on that point, then you definitely have more issues. And then that gets into more advanced tactics of like, well, do you bid on, competitors' names, or are they bidding on yours? I mean, and so that's a whole different level of complexity. We haven't gotten there yet. We haven't had to go to that point of actually bidding on our own name, but yeah. Well, so that really interesting. So you talked a little bit around, how to develop the site around the narrative. So talk to us a little more, like how should your website tell that business story, and how are different pages a part of that strategy, just beyond your homepage in general?
So our about page is the second most visited page on our website. And my dad and I co-founded One-Click. And now we have a team of developers, and the about page literally tells that story. How we went from like this agency that was trying to do everything for the SMB space, how we kind of honed in on websites, and why that's like our brand story. And people love to do business with people. So our picture is on there. You can go read our bios and things like that. And obviously the proof is in the pudding. Like that's the page that everyone wants to go to for whatever reason. I mean, out of curiosity as a buyer, I do the same thing. I go to, if I were to go to Drift, I kind of am curious to see like, what are they doing? When I go to Refine Labs, like, oh, I'd love to hear like a little bit of their story. If I'm interested in doing business with someone, again, we're in 2021, they're looking to find who they know, like, and trust. And if your business can tell that story, or your company can tell that story in an about page, then that's going to be a huge plus. Another thing that would tell the story is really not overthinking the story. So one of the tactical things, and again, we don't do messaging for our clients, but this is something that we definitely coach them on for sure, is the above the fold, which is when you land on a website and before you ever scroll, your website should answer 3 questions. The first one is, what do you do? How are you going to make my life better? And how do I buy from you? Right? So you should be able to answer those 3 questions. And then you can go deeper down the page, or the homepage, or the landing page, or whatever it is, and get into the nitty gritty if you need to, throw in some customer testimonials, and really put in the junk drawer, I guess, of things that you need to. Obviously, don't go overboard, but at least above the header, you need to answer those 3 questions.
Yeah, yes, and yes. And, we also struggled with that. And I remember when we were first kind of honing in on our strategy and trying to figure out, above the fold, what do you say? And another just side tip I will say as well, if you're a marketer and you're trying to figure out how that journey looks for scroll and what people are doing, Hotjar is a great tool. We've used it for over a year now, and it's great because you can actually watch where people click, how far down they scroll. You can even watch recordings of what they do on your site. So it's a great tool if you want to figure out how, people are interacting, if they're getting your message or not.
That's in our tech stack as well. That's one of our favorites.
Yeah, Hotjar is great. I'm a huge fan. I did a list on LinkedIn a while back of big MarTech tools that we used, and it definitely made the list. But having tools like that and figuring out, what do you do to optimize that journey? One thing that we really struggle with. So I'm a big fan of messaging as well as a marketer. And I've always, every company I've worked at and as a marketing leader have always taken them through a messaging exercise. So how do we develop a messaging guide? What are our big 3 key messages? How do you really boil that down? For us in the SaaS industry, it's even more complicated because you're having this big sea of people that provide solutions. So for us, it was really getting it down to kind of, one sentence, which is, hey, we help salespeople close more deals and build better relationships with their clients. And then, so that captures you, right? And then below that, it's like, well, hey, we do that by these 3 things. And we take content and turn it into conversations. We take data and we turn that into direction. We take average salespeople and we turn them into sales experts. But, if you're going through that website enhancement sort of journey and you're not building that messaging, you're kind of building a house in the middle of a swamp. There's not a lot of foundation there. you know?
So the thing is that this is actually something that I'm a huge proponent of. The messaging and the copy is way more important than the development and the design. And this is coming from the developer and the designer who has a team that doesn't do messaging, right? I would even go so far to say that the messaging and the copy should come first before you even conceptualize how you're going to build your website. I think that's the foundation. So hopefully that has some authority behind it, knowing that like, I don't even do the copy side of it, but I think it's more important than what I do.
No, that is, man, that's a quote right there too, Sam, because I could not agree more. And I think so many people lose that. It's just like one thing I say on this podcast all the time about, hey, don't throw technology at a problem. And so the same thing could be true for like, hey, maybe we have a problem with our sales process, but instead of fixing it, we're just going to throw a CRM at it. Or we have a problem with generating and managing marketing leads. Well, we're just going to throw a marketing automation system at it. And unless you have that core strategy and the plan, which in your case would be messaging. If you don't have messaging for your website, then no matter how good you make it look, it's not going to work. So
yeah, 100%.
Yeah, that's a big struggle for sure. So let's transition a little bit, because we've talked a good bit about, how website strategy applies to service industries. How would you really say that differs from, like, if you have, say, for instance, an e-commerce component to your business? So maybe you're an industrial manufacturing company, you're actually selling product on your site, or you're selling something tangibly on your site. What are some of the fundamental differences in how you should approach optimizing your strategy for those type of brands?
Honestly, not a lot changes. So speed, again, huge factor. What is the experience going to be like when someone lands on this e-commerce site? Is it going to be an effortless experience? I guess some nuances when it comes to like the e-commerce side. If your store is, again, like, you have to have your customer in mind. If your store is overwhelming, it's tough to navigate, and it's just straight up confusing, people are going to bounce and they're going to leave. And as a consumer, that is a huge thing for me, right? When you go to these stores, you want to be able to get through them. You want to be able to buy, pay, and get out of there, right? Another thing I would add, and I think this is, even though it's 2021, unfortunately, I still have to say this, the site needs to be mobile optimized, right? Especially an e-commerce store.
Yes.
Right. I can kind of put up with having to zoom in on a page if it's like a homepage. Again, I wish I didn't have to say this. I can zoom in on a page, but if it's an e-commerce store and I'm having to pinch my phone to type in my credit card information, dude, you've pretty much lost me at that point.
Right.
So it's like, unfortunately, like, there are still some companies out there that have put no effort into mobile optimization, and even, unfortunately, some bigger B2B companies haven't. And they've come to us and said, like, hey, this is obviously needs to be a priority. So if you're listening, people are doing business on their phones. And I don't know the exact statistic of like how many people are on their phone compared to desktops, but I'm pretty sure by now phones are definitely up there, if not winning.
I don't remember what the exact number is, but I was looking at some research reports recently that was talking about for e-commerce or any site that where, you're actually going to be selling product, e-commerce embedded, whether you're a blended service, and e-commerce, whatever. Typically it's over 70% that's going to be mobile.
Yeah,
and that's huge. I mean, at that point, like, why would you optimize for anything but mobile at that point? Yeah. Really?
Literally.
I mean, yeah. Cause it's going to be the majority of your traffic. And that's where people shop now. They shop on their phones. Service industry, again, you can kind of get away with a little more. For instance, like at our company, we still have a pretty healthy amount of traffic that's desktop, but it's still below 50%. So, it's definitely a big one. Let's move now and kind of talk about, lead generation, because especially for, tech B2B or complex B2B, that's becoming such an important component of the website, especially post-COVID, when salespeople have less interaction with people in person. So tell us a little bit about what sort of things you consult clients on to make sure that your site is optimized for lead generation.
Yeah. I'm going to say speed, 1, 2, the message. And these are things that we've covered. Another thing is, don't overthink like how you're going to be getting conversions, right? A lot of times you can see what you need to see without A/B testing something. And is this button, can we move it over a couple pixels just to like increase the conversions, right? I think a lot of people overthink that. And our strategy is to win before you get to the website. So again, the website doesn't have to do this heavy lifting of trying to convert someone. Again, they're 90% converted by the time you get to the site, right? Because they've been consuming your content in social networks. They've been listening to your podcast. They know who you are. And then when they're like, you know what, these guys have a problem I can solve, or I have a problem that they can solve. I'm going to go search for them, right? And then it gets tagged as, oh, well, we may have gotten someone through SEO, but all this time they've been consuming all this content somewhere else and they know you. And a lot of times you've already done the converting with your brand, and now they're coming to seal the deal and they're looking to say, okay, does the message that I've been hearing over here also align with your website? So I guess the number one way to get more conversions would be to make sure that your message is cohesive through all of your marketing strategies, so that when they get to the website, it's like a couple clicks and they already know, yeah, this is who I want to do business with. Boom, boom, meeting booked.
Yeah, great example. And, I think the term I've heard frequently now is dark social. So, if someone's consuming content or finding out about you where you can't attribute that. And that's one thing as a marketer that becomes more and more difficult, because we came out of, again, the mid 2010s where, we want to attribute everything and we want to attach a metric to everything. Well, that's even more challenging now with privacy changes, iOS updates, where you, number one, you can't get those details. But secondly, now it really is winning on brand, and it's winning on those, the dark social type places where people find out about you. And then ultimately they're getting there on organic search. One thing that helped us a good bit in lead generation was focusing on landing page optimization as well. And so, for instance, like especially if you're trying to use awareness channels, and by awareness channels, I mean social for the most part, you've got to have a little bit different flow. The page has got to educate someone a little more than if they are coming to you from a search strategy standpoint. And so for us, like we really tried to focus on like telling a story through some of our landing pages. And we did a good bit of A/B testing on like, what's going to grab someone's attention? Like, how do you define a problem statement? How do you immediately move that into a, what if there's a better way? And then right below that, you define how you do it. And then at the bottom of it, you provide customer testimonials and proof points. So it's kind of a, hey, why is your knee hurting? Maybe there's a better way to make it stop. Hey, look, we've got the solution. And by the way, here's all your other competitors that have already used it. So we found that sort of chain of messaging worked for us, but it took time to refine that. And it is very different from that strategy versus if someone is just coming in, organically to try to figure out how to tell those stories as well. It's so difficult in B2B because there's never one solution, right?
The big thing when it comes to like actually some tactical like website stuff, I know we talked about how to get some people there, and you really kind of address this, is the whole goal should be talking about benefits over features. And of course, especially in the SaaS world, features are going to be a huge pain point for a lot of companies, right? If they're coming to buy your product or business, whoever it is. So obviously your website needs to have some features on it, but your selling point should not be the features. It should be the benefits, right? And that should be, especially on the landing page, the homepage. And the last thing I would add to more of the nitty gritty, like how do we generate more leads, is when it comes to the experience on your site, how many steps does it take them when they land on the landing page or when they land on the homepage? How many steps do they have to take to getting that meeting booked, right? So it's book a demo or whatever your call to action is. And this was something that we kind of had to dive into on our site. And a friend of mine was like, hey, you're kind of like doing things twice for people that come to your website. So originally it was they had to fill out a form, and then it took them to a page where they booked a time on our calendar, right? And it did it all automatically. And what we realized is we could just scrap the form, put a couple questions in. We use Calendly, right? So they simply click, I think it's book a website meeting or something. It takes them to a page with our calendar. They book a time, and then it asks them a couple of questions that we were asking in a form. And now we just eliminated an entire step, right? So you have to think that way, is like, as a consumer, what would be easiest for me? And like, what would be most enjoyable? And don't force people into your ideal funnel, is I guess what I would say, because people will bounce and they're going to fall off the edges. And you're not going to get as much traffic, or your your CTAs aren't going to do as much damage if you're trying to get everyone through a form and then a bunch of crap that doesn't even matter.
Yes. And I will tell you from firsthand experience, because we had the same problem. We were having our pages where, a landing page, but then you click a CTA, which takes you to another page where you have to fill out a form. Yeah. That was a pain. And so we killed that. We just ended up putting the form on the page. But I'm glad you brought up Calendly. And that's actually something we have not done this yet. It's on my agenda for our future enhancements. But Calendly is a lifesaver because you can book. Yeah. And then Chili Piper as well. I don't know if you've ever worked with Chili Piper. We've talked to them a couple of times about solutions, but they have a pretty cool process as well. Yeah, and it's very similar. So, you can embed a calendar. Hey, let's request a demo. And they actually have some other steps that you can embed in there as well, just to make the process smoother. But it's all about reducing friction. Just how.
So here's this. I have no idea what Chili Piper did until you mentioned it, but I know who they are because of what I've been seeing on LinkedIn for the past couple of weeks.
Really?
So isn't that interesting? Yeah. It's like they've captured me with their content, and eventually I'm going to find out what they do. And I recognized it. I know this is a tangent, but because of what they've been putting on LinkedIn, but I thought that was interesting.
Well, case in point, that is a true life example of everything we've been talking about, which is every company is out to fix a problem. You're out to fix a problem of making it easier to book demos. So am I, right? But then the content or the available channels of which those organizations are building awareness is what ultimately converts. And that's the reason that companies like Calendly and Chili Piper have such rapid and powerful growth, is because they're investing in those things and because they're out there telling that story. I can tell you, this is a total side tangent, but I can tell you that the Chili Piper sales process is relentless and in a good way. I mean, they're very customized in their messaging. They're very personal in their outreach, because we've had conversations again where we've been in their funnel. So I always like to, as a marketer, to kind of compare what other people are doing in their funnel versus us, and using that to get some ideas on how to improve. But yeah, I mean, and that's, from us, again, going to a website and going through a funnel ourselves. We're all consumers. And I think so many times as marketers, it's almost like we forget that whole side of our brain that we buy stuff too. And how would we want to do it if we were a customer?
That's the best thing you can assess is, how would I want to be treated in this instance? Like when I go to a website, what's important to me? I already identified that I like going to see an about page because I like doing business with people. Even if I never talk to the CEO ever, it's kind of fun to know like a little bit of the story, right?
Yeah.
And now I can see why that translates to what we found on our site. Our about page is the second most visited page next to our homepage, right? And it makes sense because I put on the lens of a consumer.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. Well, let's hop into one more, and I know we're getting kind of close on time, but I'd be interested in learning, what marketing strategies have you seen work to drive traffic? And that can be either for your clients, some case studies or examples of what's worked, or for you guys as well. I always am interested in what others are doing to drive better traffic and conversion through their own sites.
So here's what we do for marketing. We do 2.5 things. The first one is we post, I love the word that you brought up, relentlessly on LinkedIn. We have a company page that isn't really big at all, but we're building it. And then I post to my personal profile, marketing content for specifically B2B SaaS marketers. That's hopefully helpful to them, right? And it educates the market. It builds an affinity toward us. And when the time comes, they reach out. So that's strategy number one. On top of that, we have a podcast that I mentioned at the beginning of this called B2B Made Simple. Again, same exact strategy, different medium. What we do is we bring on B2B marketing professionals. It's almost like a business development strategy. So one, I get to network with them, never try to sell to them, right? So now they know who we are. But on top of that, their peers come and listen to the podcast to learn how to be a better marketer because this person came on the show. So we're creating content, and I don't have to be a B2B marketing professional, right? I don't have to have the industry knowledge that they have. I just simply ask them leading questions and let them go. Right. So then that turns into, we can chop up the content and post it on LinkedIn. Our ideal buyers are listening to the show, and ultimately it builds more affinity toward our brand. Another reason is because they're hearing me, the co-founder of our company, right? Hopefully every single week or a couple times a week. Now I say 2.5 things because this isn't really anything big, but we have an email list where we send out an email once a week with some marketing content. And, we let people know that there's a podcast. Again, no selling, right? So what this has done for us is it's created, again, brand affinity. It's created demand for what we do. And it's created that trust because people feel like they know us when they reach out. And an example of this is I was talking to a CMO that came through our website, booked a meeting. I didn't know who they were. I'd never met them. And we were in negotiations right now, contract negotiations. And when we were on the call, they said, I kind of feel like I know you. I've been listening to your podcast for a while. That was the first thing they said, that this Zoom call was nothing new to them. And that's exactly what we're talking about here, right? I didn't have to do anything. And here they were excited to meet me and excited to like maybe do business with us. And hopefully that's like eye-opening for some marketers listening to this, that it can work.
The idea of winning the game before you ever get on the court, that is the ultimate marketing play in 2021. It's having that affinity and building those sort of connections through content creation. And man, I don't even, there's nothing I can add. That you nailed it. And another case in point too. I mean, that for everyone listening, that's actually how I met Sam. We met each other through LinkedIn activities and connected that way. I saw some of their content. So it really works. And, you heard the Chili Piper example that we mentioned earlier. All those things are important. And I also like, and credit you with the mention of the half. And the reason I laugh, I laugh because like I'm sort of in the same spot. Like we've tried a lot of different tactics like everybody, right? And so, we were trying to leverage email literally now. Like, and I'm not saying we don't do email, but mostly our email strategy is to let people know we're doing events, because that's what actually drives engagement, and then somebody might forward that on or somebody else might join, but and we'll articles and stuff, we'll do, blog updates and things like that, but we don't try to pound people from that perspective. Now we do have a sales cadence, if somebody comes in and they become a prospect, then we have, a very robust email and even a phone call and LinkedIn strategy goes along with that. But, email in 2021 really should be a half. So kudos to you for defining it.
Well, thanks, man. I appreciate it.
Defining it. Well, listen, Sam, I have really enjoyed this conversation. It's so fun to talk with another fellow B2B marketer and website expert. These conversations are always great. So for everyone listening, I'm going to leave information in the show notes. I'll include Sam's LinkedIn profile, so you can go follow him and check out all the great content that he's posting. We'll leave some additional information and resources for links to some articles and other things that you can read and research to get even better with your website strategy. But if you're finding this content enjoyable, depending on what platform you're on, give us a follow or rate this podcast. That's how it helps others find us. And it also helps keep you in tune to all of the different things we talked about or will talk about relating to sales and marketing strategies for B2B. So thank you for listening. We hope that you've taken something away from this podcast. And Sam, as always, it's been a pleasure. Thank you for taking time to join.
Thanks so much, Dave. I appreciate it, man.